Hi everyone. Sorry to cancel today. I had some things needed to work on, and sorry for the belated posting of this quiz, which will open up in just 1 minute. But typically, almost nobody jumps on it on the front end. It'll stay open until next Wednesday night. So, with that said, what is covered on this quiz? You got one comparative essay on the role of disease. You have the, I think I call them the opposing viewpoints. This one is excerpts of a debate between Martin Luther and Ulrich Zwingli that I think I mentioned during lecture, which is actually pretty funny. And then, of course, we watched, or hopefully you will watch if you haven't, the medieval apocalypse film on the Black Death. And there were only two lectures this time, the Byzantine Empire in the late Middle Ages, and then the Renaissance and Reformation lecture. So a little bit different. But with the role of disease essay, it talks about explosive growth of the population brought on by the agricultural revolution, but then lists some other factors that could contribute to the spread of disease, historically speaking. You pay attention to those. And then also in that essay, it gives some examples of deadly epidemics resulting from a disease being introduced into society that had not previously been exposed to that disease. So be aware of those. With Zwingli and Luther, just kind of have a general sense of what it is that they're debating and each one's position on that matter. And then from the film, pay particular attention when it talks about the things that people did at the height of the Black Death that they thought might help, like mortifying yourself, that is physical harm, groups that would do that as a way of penance that they thought would keep the Black Death at bay, which they figured it must be punishment from God for the many sins of human beings. And then also from the film, it actually talks about some things that actually were positive outcomes, maybe, in a way of looking at it from the Black Death, not typically how you would think about the plague, but pay attention to those. And Byzantine Empire lecture, I talked about the Great Schism, but also some of the things leading up to the Great Schism, some ways in which you can begin to see what would become a formalized split between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. Pay attention to those. I talked about the reign of Michael I and also Basil I and the beginnings of the Macedonian dynasty. That will be important. I gave you a definition of Renaissance and not just the translation that it means rebirth, which is important, but also what does that mean? You should be able to define in a few sentences for me the Renaissance. And then I spent some time pretending to know something about visual art and walked you through some of the characteristics of Renaissance art. You should be able to give those back to me and maybe even cite to some of the examples, some of the actual pieces of art that we looked at. And then second half of that lecture was dedicated to the Reformation. The bridge between that was the creation of the printing press and the role of Christian humanist and classical religious texts. So pay particular attention to that. Is there any one individual that was an important figure when it came to influencing, or as I put it, like planting a seed for people like Martin Luther to subsequently cultivate? And then speaking of Luther, I was going to ask about the 95 Theses, so you should be able to tell me what's his argument there. Obviously, you're not going to list all 95 little theses or points, but you should be able to, in a few sentences, tell me what it is that Martin Luther is being critical of and why. And that should get you through. That should be live right now. I'll post a link to it now, and as soon as this video uploads, I'll post a link to that as well. Good luck, have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.